We will start with Chad and the mental health session that we all got a nice little insight into. I was able to join in on the front half and then the back half. And as it has been for every month in and out, it's been very fruitful in regards to bringing us all to the right mind space, I think. So take it away, Chad.
Awesome. Thank you, brother. It's a 10th mental health session at the beginning of Mental Health Awareness Month. So I was really happy that we had the opportunity to do this, and very grateful for not only Tim, our subject matter expert, who told us his very powerful story, but also the audience who was highly engaged and had amazing comments that contributed to the solution that we're after. The modern mindset of inclusion is about inclusion, bringing those people into the norm, and that may not be the best way. We may have it backwards. The more effective way may be to look at it as expansion in a way where the norm no longer exists. Because what we learned from the stories and the comments that we had in this conversation is that when you do get rid of that norm, when you invite conversations, and as Charmayne puts it, you are sharing your stories where there's an environment that is created that is safe enough for you to share the stories, which, by the way, Charmayne's company has made mental health a part of their core values, which is the first I've seen. So kudos to you. But the point of this part of the conversation was that when you do share or expand the norm so much so that it doesn't exist, and people have that environment where they can share their stories and perspectives, you simply become more powerful as individuals and as an entire group. Now, in Tim's story, the biggest growth that he has had as himself and within his own family has been when they stopped trying to fix mental health and embraced it and brought in all of the perspectives and started paying attention to all of each other's perspectives. That was more the catalyst for him and his family growing beyond what they ever thought they would. So this concept of changing, or as Tim says, reframing inclusion to expansion could very well be a solution for much of the mental health issues. More importantly, the struggles that people have, not only dealing with mental health, but people helping those who are struggling with mental health have. Obviously, I'm really excited about this one because, like I said, we have been talking about the issues themselves, so we get a deeper understanding. And this one, we're really going to dig into how to help, because there's been a lot of confusion around that. So why don't we just jump into some introductions here.
So Lisa Desai, I'm with an organization called MindWise Innovations. We provide behavioral health, which includes mental health and substance misuse, resources, trainings, and suicide prevention from the continuum of prevention, intervention, postvention. So I'm a psychologist. I work with the part of our organization that works with companies so that we can provide various resources, which can be sustainable, which can be systemic, so they can keep them in-house. We happen to do a lot of work in the construction industry. So Cal was kind enough to introduce myself and a colleague to Nathan, and Nathan invited us to this, which is why I'm here.
Amazing. Once again, Cal, you're the bridge to many islands. This is
and you can pin now, Chad. Your co-host, okay. You can pin. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Nathan. Yes. So thank you, Cal. But once again, I'm not surprised. Lisa, thank you for investing time with us there. I'm really looking forward to having you part of the conversation. Cal, for those who don't know you.
Thank you, Chad.
Yes.
It's a pleasure to be here with this group. A year ago, Jeff Sample, a friend to many of you, as part of the CPC, introduced me to Nathan. Nathan quickly introduced me to Chad. we began this series of mental health roundtables. I believe it was last May 27th. And you, Chad, have done a fantastic job just bridging this gap and being open to new ideas, new topics. We've invited guests ranging from the Center for Workplace Mental Health. Today, we have a really personal story of lived experience, a gentleman who's written a book and has a great website, who really wants to help people navigate the maze and help demystify some of the mental health struggles. His name is Tim Velner, and he'll get a chance to introduce himself and tell his story in just a few moments. And then professionals like Lisa Desai, who collaborate and help our industry get better and smarter and really more effective at addressing the mental health challenge. So I work for a company called CSDZ. We're construction specialists. And when I worked for a contractor 7 years ago, I helped launch the Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Initiative in the construction industry, and that became the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention. And now I focus my work daily on worker well-being and workforce risk, just being a resource to the industry. And Chad, I always love the energy you bring. So I try whenever possible to not miss these meetings.
Oh man, it's I'm flattered that you said that. It's always an honor having you on board, Cal, because you are a force behind the movement in this industry. So it's a pleasure having you on board, and again, having you build the bridges that you're doing in this industry.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you, Chad.
Gautam, let's hear from you. What are you doing?
Chad.
And what brought you?
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate being here very much. I am a director of design technology for Steinberg Hart, originally from Mumbai, India. And the timing of this was perfect because this month on the 17th, I'm doing my own conversation with Dr. Irene, who owns Hillside Wellness out in Sherman Oaks here in Los Angeles, about mental health and well-being for AEC professionals. And then in June, I'm doing one with a licensed clinical social worker. It stems from my own personal journey in the last 1.5 years. It's been rough being alone in the pandemic. And particularly this year, since India is going through a lot of crazy ups and downs right now, being away from family. I've been here for 20 years and I see my family every year. But it's been 3 years since I've been able to see them now, and it's not easy. So I'm trying to learn from my own experience and see how I can share my insights and get insights from others and learn more on how we can manage ourselves and understand well-being generally for AEC professionals. So that's why I'm here. And when I got invited to this, I was like, wow, this is great. So I'm really grateful to be here. So thank you.
Awesome. It's thank you for coming on board. And it's, one of the most important things is keeping this conversation going. So the more people that we add to this conversation, the better it is. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Jennifer, welcome. Here's a little introduction.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Younes, VDC manager at Barton Malow. We're a general contractor. And this is actually my first CPC meeting. So just want to preface that with the way Calvin, Lisa, Gautam, the way you all introduced yourselves. This is first time I'm attending this, so I'm happy to be here, see the program, and discuss an important topic with everyone.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for joining. Charmayne, hello and welcome. Fill us in.
Hi, I work with BIM Designs and we do virtual design. And so I'm the HR manager and I was invited. Our company core values are centered around mental health. And so I'm here to learn some more things and share. We do a mental health newsletter every month. And so we like to just help bring awareness and normalize the conversation.
Awesome. That's actually the first time that I've heard core values of an organization being centered around mental health. That's, one of the things that we talk about in the roundtable here is that if you prioritize mental health, everything else improves. And because it is really at the core of performance. So that's really nice to hear. Awesome. Stacy, you're up next.
Hi, Hi, this is also my first time coming to these, so thank you for the invitation. I am Stacy, and I am a assistant professor at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and I teach in the construction management department. And I am here because I would like to hear the ways the industry is talking about this so that I can start bringing it into the classroom so we can normalize the conversation with our 18-year-olds who are about to enter industry, so it becomes an easier conversation as they get into the industry and kind of continue that trajectory forward.
Amazing. Okay, I was when I saw you on the list, I was wondering what brought you to this, and so that makes a lot of sense. Starting to normalize the conversation at an earlier stage in the process. Beautiful. Taylor, welcome, sir.
Hi. Thank you. Yeah, I just recently was invited to the group here. Actually, I was going to be in on talking with on personal, the company ID, but as it happens, I do have a little, two kind of connections, one business, one personal to this domain. Mm-hmm. So one personal is that I had mental health issues with my my father and aunt, and the sensitivity. I mean, there's nothing more important to me than mental health. Construction is important, but a little bit less. But just to, but my, we had a couple suicides in the family, and it's a big deal, and it can be avoidable. And then, but it's also not just kind of that. Actually, our technology, while otherwise I'm with a startup called Convey, while it's otherwise focused on extracting operational meaning, we extract meaning from natural language processing. So there are a lot of AI construction startups going on now that extract meaning from video, or some from kind of audio that might track a machine functionality. And we are extracting audio from natural language processing, intonation and the like. And that, of course, obviously is very relevant to tracking mental state and so forth. So.
Awesome. Well, it's unfortunate you've had to endure the tragic circumstances that you have, but at the same time, it's great that you are using those experiences to help not only keep the conversation going, but help others. So welcome everybody again. Again, Tim, I got to thank you for investing your time with us and helping keep the conversation going and providing the story that you're about to tell us, because I believe that it's going to create a really good conversation that, in your own words, will be able to help others really help those that are struggling with mental health. And so that's what today's about. The challenge of today is how might we support friends, family, and colleagues with their mental health challenges in ways that increase empathy through a deeper understanding of cognitive diversity, so that openness about mental health is not only accepted, but encouraged. Now, Tim's going to tell us his story, but there's some things about Tim that I want to cover just to tee him up properly. One is that he's not a stranger to this industry. He has been in this industry for over 25 years as a construction lawyer. Now, it's amazing that he even admits that, because some lawyers don't really admit being lawyers in construction. So Tim, that shows a lot of courage right there, brother. Thank you. Now, but one thing about Tim is he took a break from the rat race in the late 90s to study religion and spirituality. And that break in the action had a profound impact on him. But what it also had even a greater impact is than that journey was the journey that he had with his family navigating mental illness, which he is going to get into. And his experiences here have been publicized in a book that he wrote called Waking Up Work, Using Mindfulness to Uncover Unknowns and Do the Right Thing. Now, if you just note those words for a second, uncover unknowns and doing the right thing, those phrases are really at the core of today's conversation. And I can't think of a better segue than that to tee it up for Tim and say, Tim, please welcome. I'm grateful that Cal introduced us to you and you have taken the time to come here and tell your story.
Yeah, Chad, thank you for having me. This is going to be fun. Yeah. I've spent the last 4 years of my life living mental illness and mental health. And it started, it started back in the 90s. In the 90s, I graduated from law school. I started working at a law firm, and I was there maybe a year or so. And I started to look around, and I was in my 20s and said, do I really want to be doing this when I'm 50? Do I want to get up every day and do the rat race? And I said, for what? There's got to be more to life than getting up, punching the clock, so to speak, and going in. So I've always been obsessed, and still am, with the elephant in the room that everybody thinks about and very few talk about, which is, what in the heck are we all doing here? And so I sold my house, I quit my job, and I moved out to Berkeley, California, to go to divinity school at a consortium out there called the Graduate Theological Union. And one of the best things I've absolutely ever done. People from all over the world talking about spirituality, religion, philosophy, what have you. And one of the things that stuck with me, and one of the things that actually brought me back to Minneapolis, was a conversation that we had, which in one of the classes, which revolved around philosophy. And it's very easy to sit in a room and contemplate philosophy. It's very, very, very difficult to put that into action every day. Mm-hmm. And so I moved back with the intention that, all right, I want to bring purpose back into work. I want to start sharing that story. I want to have people engage in conversations of why I'm working, why I get up every day, and it's got to be more than doing it for money. And that conversation 20 years ago couldn't have taken place. What has changed in the last 20 years, at least in my opinion, at least one of the things that has changed, is the millennials. The millennials spoke up and said, we're not doing this anymore. We're not going to do what you guys have done in the past. We're going to go at things differently. We want a different work-life balance. We want a conversation about purpose. And we want a conversation about mental health. That led me recently to, I started putting presentations together for work. I fly around the country and talk to our construction teams. And one of the questions that kept coming up over and over again was, all right, you work as a construction attorney, you put deals together on the front end, but you also see when things go wrong on the back end. What's the greatest risk that our company faces? And I thought about that for a minute, zoomed up to 15,000 feet and said, here is the time, here's the opening where I am going to bring spirituality back into something as dry as construction. So I put together a presentation about risk and mindfulness. I had no idea how it was going to fly, especially with rough and tumble blue collar field. And the answer to that question is the subject of the book. It's and I'll fill you in on it in a minute. And it's incredibly intuitive after I say it. And I've had this conversation many, many times with people, and I will ask, okay, what in your opinion, and think about it for a minute, what in your opinion is the greatest risk you face in work, you face in life, you face in the classroom? And there's commonality to that answer. Very intuitive, but it becomes buried. It has become buried. because we walk around with blinders on. All of us do. We walk around in our own little bubbles. And those bubbles, especially nowadays with social media, have become smaller and smaller. And the worlds that we see are very different worlds. We live in the same world, we interact with the same world, but we live in very different worlds. And the answer to that question, at least in my opinion, the biggest risk anyone faces, no matter where you are unknown unknowns. These things that lurk out there that we never see, but sneak up when something goes wrong. And it's a little bit of a, well, no shit. Those are the biggest unknowns. What do you do about them? And the presentation I put together and the book I put together spends half the time talking about awareness, talking about how all of us walk around in our bubbles, personal bubbles, our company bubbles, our departmental bubbles, and we see only one slice of life. But there's this small segment in the social psychology studies talk about this segment over and over and over again. This 10% of the population that tends to see the world differently. They're picking up on other things that most of us aren't picking up on. And I spend the rest of the time talking about in the book and the presentations of what makes them different. And one of the most important things that makes them different, one of the most important things in opening up our worlds and expanding our bubbles, is also now the hottest topic of conversation, probably in the United States, probably in the world, and that's diversity and inclusion. And I'm going to spend the rest of the time talking about diversity and inclusion. And I feel firmly empowered as a white male living in a very affluent suburb with initials after my name to talk about diversity and inclusion and talk about how I think as companies, I think as culture, we are looking at diversity and inclusion the wrong way. And why I think I'm in a position to talk about it is because 4 years ago, my world and our family's world almost fell off a cliff. We were taken to a different universe of perspective. I was at Home Depot. I was with my son. My wife called me and she said, "Don't come home. Don't come home. There's an ambulance at our house. I'll call you when I get back." And that set in motion our daughter, our oldest daughter, her struggle with mental illness. She has been in and out of the hospital 30 to 50 times. It has become a cycle that she essentially has become addicted to because she has not been able to find connection in the real world and found connection in these programs in the hospitals. And so she repeatedly has been in and out of the hospital, in and out of the hospital. She's been to different partial hospitalization programs. She's been to 2 different residential programs. And so my wife and I, as we started going into these hospitals and these programs with her, started realizing something very slowly over time, that we were looked at differently. We would walk into the emergency room and there's always a look out of the corner of the eye of, who is this person? Or there were statements not based on facts, but based on preconceived notions. I'll never forget the first time a social worker was on the phone call. She had never met my wife or I, and she said, "Look, I'm just gonna tell you this. if you don't change what you're doing at home, your daughter's not going to get better. Shocked. She'd never met us before, and she's making assumptions on what's causing this. And I slowly started thinking, my wife started thinking, and I started thinking, we are living in a different world where, why are people making these presumptions and assumptions that we're bad people? We've given everything to help out our kids. And I'll tell one story that absolutely hammers home that point of the different reality in which we were thrown. You know, my daughter, Lucy, the one who's going through these struggles, recently turned 18. And she was in a residential program in Coates, Indiana. August was the height of COVID. The one thing most difficult about mental illness is connection. She never found it in the real world, and she ended up finding it in these programs. And so what we had been working on so hard is to show her your love, to show her there's connection. And so I thought, what better way to do this? What better way than for me to drive out to Coates, Indiana on her birthday to celebrate the birthday? So I reached out to the staff at the facility and said, I'm planning on coming out there. We're going to throw a party for her. This is going to be fantastic. And the response was, no, don't come out here. She will appreciate a Zoom call as much as you driving out there. And I thought, what? You got to be kidding me. This is her 18th birthday. I would think you would be bending over backward to help your daughter see that people love her, see that you're willing to drive out 7 hours. So anyway, I wasn't able to get through. I guess I used my attorney card to bring in the head of the facility and say, look, I'm coming out there. Whether or not I'm allowed into the building, I don't care. I'm going to make posters from our large network of family in Minneapolis. I'm going to bring balloons out there. And I will show her, even if it's for 5 minutes, that she's loved, that she's cared for, and there's connection. They still didn't want me coming out there. I said, what the hell? I'm going to do it anyway. So I got up. It's a 7-hour drive from Minneapolis to Coates, Indiana. And that drive takes you through Chicago. So I got in, I said, all right, I will be out there between 2 and 4. I got through Indiana, it was about 1:30, and there was a major traffic jam. It's about an hour drive typically between Chicago and Coates, Indiana. I got stuck in a traffic jam, and I called to say, look, I'm going to be late. It's going to be closer to 3:30 or 4 by the time I get out there. No response back. I was put on hold. So I called my wife and said, can you reach out to them and let them know I'm going to be late? So my wife got on the phone with them. About 15 minutes later, she called me back and she was furious, livid. She said, they are not allowing you to go out there. They have left. They told our daughter that you were going to be out there at 2 o'clock, and they told her that her dad blew her off. And she said, I asked them, okay, well, can he wait until you get back with the group in the van to celebrate? And they said, no, he is not allowed to see her. He blew her off. So I drove out there. They were gone in a van. They went to an outing. I sat in the parking lot. I bought a helium balloon machine. I blew up all these balloons. I put the balloons around the facility. I put up posters. And the head of the facility called me on my cell phone and said, you are not allowed to be out here. You need to leave. And I said, I am not leaving. This is her birthday. This is the most important day of her life for 18 years. She has been in inpatient hospitals for the last 4 years. She needs to see that people love her. She needs to see what we did. So I sat out there. I sat out in the parking lot for 6 hours. The van came back, they radioed the van, told them that I was out there. The van drove around on the lawn around the building to avoid me sitting in the parking lot. Here I was characterized as some bad guy because that's the preconceived notion they had of dads, of kids in the facility. So there was a nice enough therapist worker who called me at 9:30 and said, "Are you still out here?" I said, "Absolutely, I'll be here all night." And so she said, I will bring your daughter to the window and we can celebrate the birthday. So she ended up bringing her to the window. I got to spend 5 minutes with her. I drove 7 hours, stayed in the parking lot 7 hours to see her for 5 minutes. It was the best 14 hours I ever spent. And when I was driving home from Coates, this is when it hit me. I said, this is unbelievably strange. For the first time in my life, I'm not getting the benefit of the doubt. There are preconceived notions, there's prejudice. And I kept thinking, I've heard this somewhere before. Where have I heard this before? And then I recalled what Obama said when he gave his speech, and I've heard it when other Black people say, you have no idea, none, what it's like to live in the world we live in. We live in a different world. We see each other physically, but we do not live in the same world. When we walk down the street and people clutch their purses because of the color of our skin, I was feeling sorry for myself because I was now spending a small portion of my life in these hospitals where we walked in, and because the state of our daughter was such that people were making judgments based on nothing that we had done, not out of our character, but based on the situation. And I said, that's the world. That is the other world that we keep hearing about. I now get a sense to live in that world. And I kept feeling sorry for myself. What am I, this is unbelievable. I can't believe no one understands how difficult this is. Not only is our daughter in and out of hospitals, we've got people not stepping up to help us. And I use the analogy so many times, our ship is ready to sink, and the providers, you think they're ready to come and bail it out. And what do? They dump another bottle of water, another bucket of water onto your boat. We are so alone. And I thought about that for a long time. And I have a huge family. My wife has a huge family. And I asked them, where have you been? You've known about these issues going on with our family. You've known about our daughter being in the hospital. You've known how unbelievably difficult this is. We are hanging on by our fingertips and you're not saying a word. I said, if she was in the hospital with cancer, we would have people lined up around the block trying to help us out, but it was silence. And the one thing that we needed was connection, and it wasn't there. And so I started asking my family, started asking friends, where are you? Why are you not stepping up? And the response was consistently the same. We don't know what to do, Tim. We don't know what to say, Tim. And we don't want to make it worse. I sat with that for a long time. And I said, if there's anything I can do from this, it's share our experience. So I started putting together a website to share our story, to help people know what to do to help each other. But I still struggled with that question of what can we do? And I thought about that over and over, and I could not come up with an answer because mental illness is not like cancer in the hospital. Mental illness is not like physical injury where we can return back to normal. And I started thinking about mental illness on a bell curve. And I started thinking about really what's going on is that we had lived our 50 years firmly under the bell curve, under the comfort of the bell curve. We were kicked out to the edges. We were kicked out to the margins of society, the margins that Obama talks about, the margins that people talk about in living in a different element of society. And we talk in so much of what we want, and so much of how we view success is coming back into the middle. We want to bring those who are marginalized, I mean, who are living in the middle of the bell, to help out, we feel like we need to bring them back into the middle. Mental illness changes journeys, very often journeys that will never be the same. Life that existed before doesn't exist the same anymore. But I still, what do you do about that? We are now living marginalized compared to where we were before. And light bulb went off one day when a friend of my daughter's was over at the house, and she was living in foster care. She was a friend that she met at one of the residential facilities. Her mom had died when she was younger. Her dad was in the hospital. She was being raised by her stepmom. She stole some money from her stepmom, and her stepmom essentially gave her up to the state. She was living in foster care. And she was over at her house for the weekend. And I asked her, because what I do is I ask a lot of questions, and I was asking her questions of how's foster care? How do you like it? And she said something that has changed me. Absolutely changed the way I look at mental health, changes the way I approach mental health, changes the way I talk about mental health. And what she said to me was, she said, it's fine. Foster care is fine, but they want to fix me. They want to do what everybody does. They want to fix me. And then she paused a little bit and said, I'm not broken. I don't need to be fixed. And that's when it hit me. That's the answer. That's the answer for mental health. That's the answer for people who are living on the bell curve. It's not about fixing. It's about accepting and appreciating where they are on their journey in the very, 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 very unique perspective they have on life. But unfortunately, what we do, and this is when I talk about the inclusion programs, it's right in the definition of the word inclusion. When we talk about inclusion, you think about the bell curve. What are we trying to do? We're trying to bring those on the edges back in. We're trying to make them like us. And that's a lose-lose situation. It's a lose situation for those sitting under the bell, because we don't get to share the very, very unique and beautiful experience of those living on the edges. And it's a lose situation for those living on the edges because it sends a message that in order for you to be valuable to society, you need to be like us. We need to fix you. We need to make you change. I'm a fixer. I've always been a fixer. That message never resonated with me. And it's interesting because I think about that statement so unbelievably often of how painful that message is, that we who are otherwise, I think, very well-meaning, send a very inadvertent message when we try to fix, when we put programs together to say, you're not worthwhile as you are. I thought for a while, when, after this last election, how 70 million people could vote for Donald Trump. I think I have an idea of why 70 million people voted for Donald Trump. It's because the programs that, and I fall on the left end of the political spectrum, and I'm right in that group. We send a message that we have these programs, we have these ideas to fix you. Your lives are not worthwhile. Your jobs are terrible. You are not worthwhile, but we will fix you. And that's an incredibly, incredibly damaging message. And it's a message that we're sending to those who are living at the edge of the bell curve. So what do we do about it? So instead of talking about inclusion, instead of talking about bringing those at the edge of the bell curve back in, maybe we reframe that to call it expansion. Rather than moving out, rather than moving them into our world, bring our world out to them. That changes it from a lose-lose to a win-win. When we can go out and we can start to hopefully, because we'll never get there, but start to see some of this different world that I was talking about, our eyes are going to open, and our little bubbles that we have around ourselves may start to expand, and some of these unknown unknowns that exist out there are going to start popping up. And we're also sending a message to those at the edge that your lives, although difficult, are unbelievably important. They are treasures for the rest of us. You look at the world differently because you experience the world differently. And that's important. It's important to share, and it's important for you to continue to be exactly where you are because you're valued. One message that I see so much coming around in social media right now, and not only we have our daughter who is 18 now, we also have a son who is 14 and he's cognitively disabled. So we've got 3 kids, 2 of whom are living at the very edge of the bell curve. And I tend to see a lot of posts, especially recently, and maybe it's just because I've just become so attuned to this concept, but I saw one a while ago. It was about a boy, an autistic boy, who there must have been 30, 40,000 upvotes, likes, whatever you call those things on LinkedIn. It was about an autistic boy who had become the captain of his swim team. It was an autistic boy who got into college. And I looked at that and something struck me as a little bit odd. And I thought about it a little bit more. And I thought, that's fantastic. But really, I think what we're doing by those upvotes, we are celebrating someone on the edge of the bell curve being brought back in. What we are celebrating is that autistic boy becoming like us. It makes us happy when he can share. And I thought, well, okay, that's good. But what's the flip side of that? How do we tell a story of how do we move out to their world? How do we, under the bell curve, start to share in these worlds, these beautiful perspectives that people live in at the edge of the bell curve? I was 2 weeks ago. I was with my daughter, 18-year-old daughter. We were driving out to Wisconsin, and we were at a diner having lunch, and the waitress came over, and the waitress is full of tattoos all up and down her sleeve. And as she was handing us the check, my daughter looked at me and said, "Dad, ask her about her tattoos." This is the different perspective I'm talking about, the different perspective that she sees than I see because she's in a different world, the different perspective that helps us bring up the unknown unknowns at work that helps all of us. She said, "Dad," I'll start crying if I talk. She said, "Dad, ask her about her tattoos. And so I did. We were smiling, and she had the appearance of someone who was very happy-go-lucky. And I asked her about her tattoos, and she explained, well, I have one up here. She said, this is for my grandma. See these roses up here? My grandma loved roses. She died 5 years ago. She said, this down here, these tattoos, this one is for my best friend, and this one is for her boyfriend. They died in a car accident 2 years ago. And she started crying. The waitress started crying. And I said to my daughter, because I'm not in that world. I said, do you think I brought up a sad subject and that's why she's crying? And she looked at me sort of cross-eyed and she said, Dad, she's crying because you cared. She's crying because you cared enough to move out to her world. That's expansion. That's accepting and appreciating those at the edge of the bell curve for who they are, not trying to change them, not trying to fix them, but simply for being who they are. That's the message that we need to send. That is absolutely where I'm at. That's where I'm going to continue to be. And it's interesting, yesterday, I'll see if I can share this screen. One of the things that gets at me is, I mentioned our son is cognitively challenged as well. There are many, many, many families struggling with mental illness, many families struggling with cognitive challenges, but so few people are willing to talk about it. So few people are willing to open up about it. And I can't help but think it's because they're ashamed that they're living at the edge of the bell curve, that they view success as coming back underneath the bell instead of appreciating the beauty for living at the edge of the bell curve and sharing the beauty that they live at the edge of the bell curve. That's the treasure, at least in my mind. I mean, I look, 2 out of my 3 kids are at the very edge of the bell curve. And I look at my life, I look at my other daughter's life, I look at my wife's life, and that's 7% of time, this last 4 years. We have grown exponentially. We are changed people. We don't see the world anymore. And we're unbelievably grateful. That's what we have to share. There is nothing to be ashamed of living at the edge of the bell curve. That's the beauty, but we have to share it. We've got to make it okay not to be okay. We've got to start putting, I would love to see us putting those posters everywhere. Instead of being ashamed to live at the edge of the bell curve. No, absolutely not. I look at the world differently than you do. And that is hugely important to me. And it could be hugely beneficial to you. But that means a new message. That means shifting the message. That means opening up about our struggles. That means sharing our struggles. And so I put this together yesterday. It's still sort of a work in progress, but this summarizes essentially what I'm talking about. All of us at one point or another are either at the edge of the bell curve or we know someone at the edge of the bell curve. Let's own it. Let's share it. And then hopefully others start sharing it. And then we can shift the message from shame to treasure. But it's going to take work and it's going to take courage. And that's where I'm at. And that's my story. And hopefully it helps others share their story. One of the other things I did too, and I know, Chad, you had some questions on the website that I put together, and it's on the bottom of that poster. It's called Waking Up Mental Illness. And when I put it together, people say, that's the question. Why would you want to wake up mental illness? Why would you want to wake something up that we should not? That's who we are, right? This whole concept of I am not autistic. I saw another post on LinkedIn yesterday that said, this is my son. This is my son. He does not have autistic. He is not autistic. He is my son. I thought that's true, but yes, he is autistic, and let's own it and let's share it.
Yeah.
Let's be proud of it. And so that's the reason for the poster. And, I'd like to get feedback too on what people think about that poster. What's the message that you see when you read that? Does it resonate with you? Do you think it will resonate with others? Do you have ideas of how we can share that message? So I'll kick it back to you, Chad.
I love the way that you ended that actually with a question. And if there is somebody that can answer that question with their own personal experience, that'd be outstanding.
My main experience was with family in deep depression and suicidality. But I also do have more limited experience with someone who had an ongoing cognitive difficulty. That was a cousin. And one of the things I kind of wonder, I think your point is very good, Timothy, that, we need to, kind of wake up to these different situations and be aware of them. And, obviously this is a kind of a construction forum and figure out how to deal with them a little bit in the domain of construction and so forth. But, one tricky thing is that that comes to mind for me is that, some of them, pretty much all of them, all circumstances reach out for a special attention, understanding, and accommodation of various types. But some of them, like depression, for example, might reach out, might really indicate, identification and like rapid work to help. With can be, various things can be kind of helped or changed to different degrees. And some are more critical, time critical, and so forth. So there is a little bit of difference. So like if you have somebody who's maybe where one way or another, you've got an indication on site that there's suicidality or depression, that might demand one need, which is a rapid help. And then another thing, another situation might be cognitive, which might be more long-term support. And so I guess I'm kind of wondering like how you might distinguish those two. I mean, I guess if you, to begin with, feel it makes sense to distinguish those two, because while both are, out of the realm of the kind of the spectrum of normal, we wouldn't want to necessarily, I think, treat each of them the same. I mean, depression, we might want to remediate, pretty quickly if it's possible, because it is possible for somebody who's depressed to not become depressed within if really helped within a certain amount of time. So, how do we treat people with different kind of, both prognoses and time frames and all of these things, in terms of at least, getting at the ones that can be helped. Fixed is not the word, but you understand there's that very bias, but helped, but certainly depression, suicidal depression is not a good thing. Helped quickly, and others that can, where around whom we can build like a support structure.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's kind of getting into the weeds. And I'll tell a little bit of, and I know we have a couple mental health practitioners on here. Of suicide is really, really tough, and suicide is it's that whole idea is leads to some very unintended consequences that drive a cycle that's almost impossible to break. So our story started with our daughter and everybody knows that story. 8th grade, not connecting, not sitting in the lunchroom, going to the counselor's office. She never found her niche, never found connection. She went into one of these programs one of these mental health programs, she found her connection. And we were warned about that. I went down to the Mayo Clinic to talk, and the two things that she said, two things that the psychiatrist down there said to me, and I'll never forget. She said, Tim, you throughout this journey, and it's going to be a long journey, two things to keep in mind: keep her alive and keep her out of the hospital. Never understood, and I understand it more than I could ever want to know right now, is keep her out of the hospital. What had happened is she found connection in the programs. She found connection in the hospital, and she's been in and out of the hospital, I would say close to 40 times. And so I use this analogy all the time with ER doctors and therapists, and really good educated psychiatrists understand it, and most don't, that it is very much equivalent to drug addiction. She has found her escape from difficulty in the real world by going to the hospital. It's an environment that she's found connections when she has therapists in there. And it's by very well-intentioned people, we have created an environment because people don't want suicide to happen on their watch. And, I will say it over and over and over again. And I've heard it. Where do you set this line of sending them to the hospital? Because you are now starting to create a magnet, a pull that is unbelievably difficult to break. And that's the situation that we're in. And it takes a lot of courage for someone, for a professional, for a parent, for anyone to say, I'm not going to send her into inpatient. And that line has to be drawn. But there is, in my opinion, a lack of awareness of the damage that these programs can cause in creating an easy escape from the real world. And it just manifests. And that's the answer, I think, is awareness. The answer, I think, is a discussion of that topic. And the answer, I think, is from my advice to the medical profession, at least from what we've experienced, is better education to families ahead of time of, programs do help. We got to keep them safe. There's no doubt about it. But we're also potentially creating other issues out here by sending them in.
So I was, I think you're bang on. In my past, I was a part of that problem. I was in crisis resolution myself. And there was always, our response was always a path to professionals or resources. That was it. So I love the fact that things are starting to change, things are starting to evolve, because I do recognize, I was a part of that wheel when I was in crisis resolution myself. So for the people on the call, how can HR departments, or how can people even help HR departments or the executives of their organizations, or if they are executives of organizations, really start to be a better solution to the problem? That question's for anybody on this, because I know we have some professionals here as well.
I was going to say that I like the point that was brought up about bringing our world to them and being more open to hearing their story. Like how you said, the girl started crying because she was getting to share, and sharing is part of healing. It's part of bringing, you're seeking that acceptance. They're taking the first step by sharing. And that's a big deal, because sharing is traumatic sometimes because you're rethinking about it, or, it's painful to share. And so it's painful to heal, but it's something that they have to do. And so we have to accept and encourage the sharing and the healing so that it's normal, that it's something that's just, when people have those traumatizing events or things that make them depressed, it's best for them to feel comfortable enough with someone to share it and feel that they're going to be accepted and not judged. And it helped is sometimes out of, the question, I can't help you, but I'm here to hear you and, hopefully try to help you in any way that I can. But sometimes what the actual help they need, or just helping them get that first step by sharing and feeling accepted and not judged, is a big deal, of just feeling more normal to talk about it. Once that normal conversation starts to flow, and even sharing is important, because even though it's traumatic, it's like you said, some people just don't know, and they don't see it because it's not a part of their world. but getting it out and sharing it, even though it can be traumatic and hard to say and bring up, it's just, you have to do it so that everyone knows. And the worlds are not, it's not two different worlds, it's one world, because we all know. And we can't put the blinders on and act like we don't know, as long as it's out there and being discussed and a normal thing. So the first step I think that is most important is making it normal and making people feel comfortable sharing their trauma, because we all have trauma.
Awesome point. So then to double down on that, how can people, how can somebody who, if they observe somebody under stress who can benefit from the healing process of sharing, how can somebody on that outside, or let's say inside the bell curve, so somebody on that inclusion side, how can they be that trigger to help somebody share? How can they say it without offending somebody? How can they say it that gives them the feeling that it's okay to share?
Chad, that's a very delicate path to walk, because there may be people that are not ready to share yet.
Yeah.
There are very two powerful things at play here. The one is that sharing is, yes, Charmayne, that's a very valid point. And I see that Nathan, highlighted that sharing is traumatic. That's true. The other thing that's very difficult for a lot of people is to seek help. They are unwilling to seek help because they have reservations about how they will be judged or how they will be looked at after they seek or after they've sought that help. So if someone sees someone in trauma, it's a very delicate situation, because if you decide to point someone to that, there's a very good chance you could end up hurting them more. So I don't have an answer for it.
I'll chime in on that. I agree with everything. That is one of the most difficult situations. One of the things that and I put this in my book about companies, but it's in employees, but it's really applicable here as well, is, and I got a story that I can tell that we went through, but I don't have time, that really drives home the point. But I think the most effective way to establish connection is vulnerability. And when we can start being vulnerable, every one of us at one point in our life, some more than others, are at the edge of the bell curve. And if we can start being vulnerable, that may, who knows, it may open up an opportunity for someone else. But, I agree, Gautam. It's, you can't, they got to do it when they're ready, and we can plant the seeds and hopefully help them. And, the one thing I will say too is about when someone's struggling, the one thing that really always bothered me a little bit is if someone is sharing their story and someone's opening up about their story, the worst thing you can do is make it about you. And so often that happens is you finally feel, okay, I feel okay to share my struggles, and someone jumps in and they start talking about that is the biggest damper on healing, is when someone else doesn't listen. And Charmayne, I think you said it really, it's about listening and being vulnerable. And that's what we've found, at least, and there's so few people who do it well, but there are people who do it unbelievably well. And they come out of the woodwork and you never have expected, of people who just know how to listen and just send a nice, unexpected email in the middle of the day that says, thinking of you.
Be eyes and ears.
Yeah, that, an email in the middle of the day that says, thinking of you, who knows how it's going to be received, but it's changed my life. A couple of people have done that. It's really picked me up. And so that's my 2 cents on that issue.
Oh, I mean, just one quick question. Just a one-line question. When it comes to that kind of thing, somebody prompting openly and honestly, like, I'm thinking of you, your thoughts are welcome, I'm not intruding on your thoughts. How does HR or whatever go about doing that in an honest way, so that if somebody's having a problem, it's identified, maybe it's identified by HR, the individual in person doesn't know HR has identified this problem, but HR wants to reach out to the person in some authentic way, to help. Just an open question. not necessarily. That's an open question. But,
no, I think that's really tough, because if you do it in the wrong way, I think you send a message that we're trying to fix you.
Right. So, Lisa, I saw you were starting to talk. I'll let you continue.
Oh, thanks. Timothy, thank you for sharing your story. I mean, there's so many powerful pieces. It's hard to know kind of what to react to. I was really struck by when you talked about asking your family, kind of, where have you been? You know, haven't heard from you, and their fear about asking about it. And I feel like there's so much fear about talking about mental health. And you're exactly correct. If it's cancer, if it's somebody broke an arm, they're going to send over a casserole. They're going to see how you're doing. So I think really making this more visible is the way to increase comfort. I mean, when you think about statistics, like 70% of Americans, adult Americans, have experienced at least one episode of significant anxiety in their lives. It makes you think about what's normal, quote normal, what's not normal. And also about your poster, that image that you shared. I love that, because it really is about our assumptions. We think we can tell by looking at somebody that they're struggling, and you can't. And that's one of the, the biggest assumptions. In terms of the workplace piece about how to talk about it there, I do feel like it's so much about the culture of the workplace. You have to slowly build a culture where you can talk about this openly and there's trust. And it's not just throwing out an EAP card or a link, but actually creating the space to have these conversations.
Man, so really good point. And I think you just opened up a can of worms here, because with what's going on now with COVID and isolation and work from home, like when you said, creating that space and culture, space or culture is really about the space around you and the people that you're sharing it with. And that's how that type of culture is created. So I see a real big problem here escalating, simply because so many people are working in isolated environments now. That's a statement to kind of probe some thought. And if anybody's got some ways around that, it would be beneficial, because I don't see an out there. It's when humans are, when we have evolved to be around each other and share the same space and recognize, human signaling and engage in conversations and build a culture together and share the same language. And then that's being put that is now going in the opposite direction of what our, brains were designed to how our brains were designed to perform. I don't know how we're going to get over that safely.
Well, I have one quick question, which is, addressing we've talked about stigma. Like if we're talking about somebody in the field or in construction or whatever position, like addressing the stigma that all of that person's peers may have, that's a very big and difficult question. Still an important one, but maybe an initial question, a simpler one, is like, how do you, that individual may also have the very same stigma. Like if you can reach out to that person privately, like how do you, engage that person in a way that, I don't know, recognizes the fact that the reality that they're surrounded by people who do have stigma, while kind of trying to get them a little bit beyond that.
I was going to say that within our company, the way that we try to normalize it or to get the conversation going is, like you said, Taylor, by talking about something that everybody is experiencing, like burnout. If we're all feeling like we're all pounding the pavement, working really hard, then if one of us makes a post about, the way burnout is affecting a lot of people in the country and kind of bringing it up, then people are having little side conversations about it and how the burnout is affecting them. And then it's starting to become a normal conversation about just how we're feeling mentally because of our workload or, just whatever is causing us burnout. And so just posting something, and because yes, our company definitely does, we all work from home. So we just have like Teams is our central like communication, and we share just like podcasts about certain things or certain like meditation, and we've all got a Calm app. We did the Calm app thing so we can all meditate, and just kind of spreading mindfulness and trying to help each other heal in certain ways is kind of how we're trying to create the culture within our company, and making it one of our core values to have trust with each other and talk and, you know.
I love that, going at it through an indirect route, basically opening up the door for the conversation.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, when I meet with my team, I do something very similar. We don't go at the problem and ask if they're okay. We ask other questions that will identify triggers for the conversation, such as, do you feel in control of your day? Is there any, it's usually 3 questions. Do you feel in control of your day? Do you feel that there's anything at risk that's on your plate? And the third one is rank your level of focus. You know, give me a good rank for your level of focus between 1 to 5. And then when you see a pattern in a degradation, or you see a pattern in loss of control, then that asks the question, hey, is there something going on that we can help with? So it's an indirect way of asking that might prompt or be a catalyst to the important conversation.
Hey, Chad, how do you deal with the situation in Charmayne as well of there, you know, that's kind of walking a fine line of asking people to be vulnerable, but yet not opening the forum for people who are inclined to complain. And you making it, because some people want to make, you know, my life is so miserable here about me, right? And there's so the fine line of you know, how do you deal with people who usurp conversations about their rough life, and instead of, you know, trying to facilitate conversations that many can join in on?
Well, so you know, I'm assuming what you're trying to avoid is an ongoing or everlasting pity party, and you still want to open up the conversation, but you also want to avoid the pity party. And how we deal with that is a long-term solution through preparing the people to perform in volatile, actually the acronym right behind me, VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It was a term born in the military, but it's becoming more common for the modern world to describe and characterize challenging scenarios. So we actually have a training course that's like 7 weeks long, that helps prepare people to perform better under critical stress. So it's a long-term solution. And the tactics that we use in this course are tactics that were used in the military. I train professional fighters on the side, and we use them for training the fighters, but we've converted them into a corporate-friendly environment. And so there, in my opinion, there is no short term. It's being eyes and ears and letting them talk. But over the long term, it's about building the ability to train your brain to perform under pressure. That's
on that note. That was awesome. Chad, I mean, this is definitely the longest we've just gone, and I think everyone's just mesmerized. Anybody that came on midstream that was like, so you want me to put you in your breakout room? They're like, no, I'm good. I'm just going to stay here in mental health.